Mercedes stunned the Formula One world in Canada with a commanding 1-2 finish, and now the entire paddock is on edge. Just hours after George Russell and Kimi Antonelli secured the front row for Mercedes, speculation inside the paddock began to grow rapidly. Reports suggested the FIA had uncovered fresh information linked to Mercedes' aggressive new upgrade package. Suddenly, the conversation in Formula One shifted away from the result itself and toward a much bigger concern. Had Mercedes discovered a hidden performance advantage that every other team completely overlooked? That possibility is exactly what has rival teams worried. Before arriving in Montreal, the FIA had already moved to clamp down on an engine-related system many believed was responsible for Mercedes' impressive straight-line speed. Most people expected the crackdown to slow them down immediately. Instead, George Russell claimed pole position with Kimi Antonelli right beside him, both drivers comfortably ahead of the rest of the field by more than 0.3 of a second. Max Verstappen could only qualify 7th, while Ferrari appeared nowhere near competitive enough to challenge. But what truly shocked the paddock was not simply the pace, it was the way the Mercedes behaved on track. The car looked incredibly composed through heavy braking zones, stable over aggressive curbs, and smooth in traction areas, where rival cars appeared nervous and difficult to control. Russell and Antonelli attacked the circuit walls with a level of confidence that no other drivers seemed able to match. That is why tension inside the garages escalated so quickly. Rival engineers immediately turned their attention toward Mercedes' redesigned gearbox, lighter rear structure, revised aerodynamic package around the floor and diffuser, and a potentially crucial detail hidden underneath the car itself. Now the entire Formula One community is asking the same question. Did Mercedes quietly unlock an even greater advantage, while everyone else remained distracted by the FIA's earlier intervention? The first signs of concern actually appeared before sprint qualifying had even ended, though most viewers watching the broadcast missed them completely. While fans celebrated the Mercedes front row lockout, engineers from rival teams were focused on something far more important, understanding exactly how the Mercedes was generating such a huge performance advantage. That realization changed the atmosphere inside the paddock almost instantly. It was not just about lap times anymore. It was about the behavior of the car itself. Canada is one of the most unforgiving circuits on the Formula One calendar when it comes to exposing weaknesses. The track features long straights, huge braking zones, aggressive curbs, and walls waiting to punish even the smallest mistake. Any instability is usually obvious immediately, yet the Mercedes looked almost flawless. George Russell attacked the final chicane aggressively without any visible instability, while Kimi Antonelli launched out of slower corners with remarkable traction. Under braking, the rear of the car stayed planted while rival cars constantly twitched and moved underneath their drivers. That is exactly why rival teams became increasingly uncomfortable, because only days earlier, the FIA crackdown had supposedly been aimed directly at hurting Mercedes. Many within Formula One believe Mercedes had relied heavily on a controversial engine-related advantage to achieve their straight-line performance. The assumption was simple. Remove the advantage, and the pace would disappear. Instead, Canada completely destroyed that theory. Rather than looking weaker, Mercedes suddenly appeared stronger and more complete than ever before. That kind of improvement is highly unusual after an FIA technical intervention. Normally, when a team loses a significant performance advantage, weaknesses appear elsewhere immediately. Cars become inconsistent, drivers lose confidence, and engineers scramble to recover balance and stability. Mercedes showed none of those warning signs. According to reports from inside the paddock, Mercedes arrived in Montreal with the team's biggest upgrade package of the season. This was not a small adjustment or minor tweak, it was a major step forward involving several key areas of the car simultaneously. The most significant change reportedly involved a redesigned gearbox that was smaller, lighter, and more compact internally. To casual fans, a gearbox might seem like a straightforward mechanical component, but in Formula One, packaging changes like this can dramatically alter the behavior of the entire rear section of the car. Imagine trying to sprint through a crowded airport while carrying a heavy backpack. If someone suddenly removes that weight and redistributes the balance perfectly, movement becomes easier, smoother, and more natural. That is essentially what Mercedes may have achieved. And Canada is exactly the kind of circuit where those benefits become obvious immediately. Every major braking zone rewards stability. Every traction zone rewards efficiency. Every aggressive curb rewards driver confidence. The Mercedes suddenly seemed to excel in all three areas at once. However, the larger concern inside the paddock centered around the car's aerodynamic behavior. Reports specifically mentioned changes around the side pods and floor area that were designed to improve airflow toward the diffuser. That detail immediately attracted attention across the garages because, in modern Formula One, airflow underneath the car controls nearly everything. Stable airflow keeps the rear planted and predictable. Disturbed airflow instantly creates instability and nervous handling. The Mercedes looked unbelievably calm through every critical section of the circuit. That is why rival engineers reportedly began paying extremely close attention throughout practice and qualifying sessions. It was not just because the Mercedes was quick, it was because the car looked efficient in every possible situation. Under braking, over curbs, during acceleration, and even through rapid direction changes where rival cars appeared unstable and unpredictable. Then, another detail made the entire situation even more explosive. The Mercedes drivers themselves did not appear surprised by the pace at all. George Russell openly admitted after qualifying that the upgraded car felt fantastic, while Antonelli sounded relaxed and confident throughout the session. More importantly, Toto Wolff made a comment that immediately caught the attention of rival teams. He said the upgrade package worked exactly as expected. That wording mattered far more than many people realized because it suggested Mercedes already knew the package had the potential to dominate before the weekend even began. In Formula One, confidence of that level immediately creates suspicion, especially when the gains arrive directly after an FIA crackdown. That is why the atmosphere surrounding Mercedes changed so dramatically on Friday in Montreal. This was no longer viewed as simply a strong sprint weekend. Rival teams now wanted to know whether Mercedes had secretly uncovered another major advantage, while everyone else remained focused on the FIA's previous intervention. Then sprint qualifying finally began, and that is when tension inside Formula One exploded completely. This was supposed to be the session where Mercedes finally looked vulnerable after the FIA crackdown. Instead, they appeared untouchable. George Russell secured sprint pole with a lap time of 1 minute 12.965, while Kimi Antonelli completed the front row lockout just 0.068 seconds behind. But the most shocking statistic was the gap to the rest of the field. Lando Norris, the fastest non-Mercedes driver, was over 0.3 slower. Ferrari was more than 0.4 behind. Max Verstappen could only manage 7th place. In modern Formula One, an advantage of that size immediately raises suspicion, not because dominance itself is illegal, but because teams understand how difficult it is to suddenly gain that much performance in an extremely competitive field. At that point, the atmosphere inside the paddock reportedly shifted completely. Rival engineers stopped focusing only on the final lap times and began analyzing details instead, how the Mercedes behaved over curbs, how stable it looked under braking, and how effectively it accelerated out of slower corners, despite the FIA intervention that was expected to hurt them. The more laps rival teams studied, the more uncomfortable the situation became because the Mercedes looked almost too complete. Even dominant Formula One cars usually reveal weaknesses somewhere.